I was choosing a Dior wedding dress for my future daughter-in-law when I received an anonymous email with her name on a competitor's transaction list. People call me the queen of the Fleur Eternelle perfume empire. Power, wealth, and a dream family are what they say about me. My son, Adrien, a romantic artist, has always been sheltered by me in a prosperous cocoon. His fiancée, Elodie, a de Valois family heiress, elegant, proud, and seemingly perfect to the point of being untouchable. Tonight, at Le Grand Veffort, I am behind everything, from the guest list, the wine selection, to every beat of the service. This engagement party is not just a celebration, but a demonstration to Paris that everything people say about me is true. A lavish party, a talented son, a beautiful daughter-in-law, and their affection for me. Everything went according to plan, until I walked over to their table. Elodie leaned in slightly, whispering to Adrien, her eyes glancing at me, cold but discreet. No one noticed, but I felt the tension in her gesture. I raised my champagne glass, ready to toast with her. But she smiled faintly, pulling Adrien's hand, as if to keep him all to herself. Adrien was silent, his eyes fixed on the table. The atmosphere at the table grew heavy. The clinking of cutlery and the surrounding chatter seemed to be swallowed whole. I smiled, a cold smile. I nodded. I turned away, as if nothing had happened, but each step felt as heavy as stone. A question echoed in my mind. Why? Before, she was always polite and sweet. Or, did she think the engagement ring was enough to challenge me? That night, an anonymous email arrived, attaching documents listing suspicious transactions related to Elodie. I didn't act hastily. As the head of Fleur Eternelle, I knew that impulsiveness could destroy everything. Claire, check the source of these documents, I ordered. While waiting, I postponed the castle and Dior wedding dress contracts. If Elodie has a secret, I will find it, I told myself, tightening my grip on the wine glass until my knuckles were white. The next morning, Adrien called, his voice trembling but resolute. Mom, I talked to Elodie. She's very upset that the castle contract was cancelled. I asked the de Valois family's lawyer. They said, there are no debts like you suspect. Is there a misunderstanding? I heard the conflict in his voice, torn between his love for Elodie and his trust in me. Mom, I need to know the truth. I tightened my grip on the phone, replying curtly, I'm looking into it, Adrien. Be patient. An hour later, my secretary informed me that Elodie had sent an email. I believe this is a misunderstanding. When you calm down, we can talk. Calm down? I had never been more clear. Headed. The next morning, my phone exploded. Messages, notifications, and humiliating headlines. The engagement party of the century turns into a public embarrassment. The accompanying photo was cruel. I was standing there, champagne glass in hand, while Elodie turned away, laughing with someone else. The angle captured the moment my lips tightened. The image of a dethroned queen. The press tore apart the perfect family I had built over many years, calling it an empty spectacle. Paris was laughing at me. I sat there, my coffee cold, feeling as if the world was collapsing. Then the doorbell rang, the door opened, and the past rushed in. Jean-Pierre, my ex-husband whom I hadn't seen in 15 years, walked in, holding a file, his eyes as cold as the day he lost the lawsuit to me years ago. At that time, I exposed him for transferring Fleur Eternelle's money into secret funds, which cost him his reputation, partners, and Adrien, who chose to stay with me. You took everything away from me, he had screamed in the courtroom. Now, I saw in his eyes not only hatred, but also a desire to pull Adrien to his side, even to regain influence over Fleur Eternelle. You should see this, he said, his voice deep and gravelly, handing me the file on Elodie forged documents prepared through a discreet media company. But I knew Jean-Pierre. He always left a loophole, and I would find it. I opened it. Bank statements with Elodie's name, but the money came from strange men. Photos of her in a dim light, intimate with suspicious figures. Invoices for designer goods that Adrien would never buy. A perfect indictment, portraying her as a gold digger. Why? I asked, looking him straight in the eyes. He shrugged, a cold shrug. I just want you to see your real enemy. In my mind, everything twisted together. The humiliation at the party, the headlines, and this file. Anger had a face, a name. But I wouldn't react impulsively. I pushed the file back towards him, my voice sharp. If you've set up the chessboard, Jean-Pierre, I'll be the one to deliver the checkmate. Adrien rushed into the office, his eyes full of conflict, and closed the door, pulling a white envelope from his jacket and placing it on the desk. Mom, I checked with the Desvalois family's lawyer. There are no debts like in this letter. What do you know about it? His voice was trembling, not just with anger, but because he was trying to protect both Elodie and his family. I talked to Elodie. She thinks someone wants to drive us apart. Mom, I need the truth. I looked at him, my heart aching. I didn't send that letter, Adrien, but I will find out who is behind it, I replied, my voice firm. He paused, his eyes still suspicious, then turned and left the door ajar. I opened the envelope, a blank piece of paper, no logo, just a typewritten line. The Desvalois family owes millions of euros. Back off, or Paris will know. Jean-Pierre. Only he was devious enough to make Adrien doubt me. 3 days later, Le Monde published an article, The Desvalois Family, Glamour or Illusion. The article dragged Elodie's entire family into the spotlight. Debts, abandoned real estate projects, and rumors of selling antiques to pay off interest. A photo of Elodie with an entrepreneur was placed in the middle of the page. The information was too detailed to be just a rumor, and much of it I had never heard before. Adrien called right after the news spread online. His voice was choked, but full of determination. Mom, I met with Elodie. She's devastated, but she says someone is deliberately slandering her family. I contacted a friend in journalism. They said the documents in the newspaper show signs of forgery. Do you know who is behind this? I fell silent, realizing that Adrien was trying to mediate between Elodie and me, even though his heart was breaking. I didn't do this, Adrien. But I will find the truth, I said, my voice resolute. People call me the queen of the Fleur Eternelle perfume empire. Power, wealth, and a dream family are what they say about me. My son, Adrien, a romantic artist. His heart belongs to art, but his life belongs to me. I had enveloped him in a flawless cocoon of prosperity. His fiancée, Elodie, a Desvalois family heiress, elegant, proud, a precious gem that I had chosen to place on my family's crown. Tonight, at Le Grand Vaufour, I am behind everything. From the guest list of names that could change the entire Parisian economy, the Chateau Margaux, 1,980, to wine, to every beat of the service, precise as a machine. This engagement party is not just a celebration. It is a display of power, to prove to all of Paris that my empire is invincible. Everything went according to plan, flowing like a silk river, until I walked over to their table. I raised my champagne glass, a warm, well-rehearsed smile on my lips. Congratulations, my dears. Adrien smiled back, beginning to raise his own glass. But Elodie didn't move. She sat up straight, her eyes sweeping over me, cold and empty, as if I were just a waiter who had disturbed her meal. She didn't bother to hide her annoyance. She wanted me to see it. She leaned in slightly towards Adrien, her golden hair almost touching my son's shoulder. She whispered something, her thin lips closing into a straight line as soon as she finished speaking. I saw her hand placed lightly on the back of Adrien's hand, her long, slender fingers like an invisible handcuff, holding my son tightly. The smile on Adrien's face vanished, replaced by a look of confusion and awkwardness. The hand holding his glass paused in midair, then slowly lowered to the table, making a small but resounding clink in the silence that was gradually spreading. He didn't dare to look at me, only bowed his head, his eyes glued to the napkin on his lap, as if it were the most interesting thing in the world. Silence. Cowardice. The people at the table also noticed the unusual atmosphere. An old count stopped cutting his steak. A female bank director suddenly became very interested in the patterns on the ceiling. They stopped talking, glanced at each other, then quickly looked away, pretending not to see anything. But I knew they were listening, watching. The air at the table grew heavy, suffocating. I kept the smile on my lips, but I could feel my facial muscles tensing, hardening like stone. I nodded, a decisive nod from a queen who never reveals weakness. I turned away, each step firm on the marble floor. But inside, a cold fury was beginning to boil, to surge. A single question echoed in my mind. Why? Where was the sweet, polite girl I used to meet at tea parties? Or did she think that just by wearing this ring, she could start her own game at my table? She had miscalculated the first move, and in this game, I never lose. That night, in the silence of my apartment overlooking the Seine, an anonymous email arrived. No subject, no content, just an attachment. My heart skipped a beat. I opened it. A summary of bank transactions, with Elodie's name and large sums of money transferred from an investment fund that I knew was a sworn enemy of Fleur Eternelle. The blood in my veins ran cold. This was no longer the rudeness of a young girl. This was a calculated betrayal. Did she approach Adrien with a purpose? Was tonight's humiliation just a clumsily disguised declaration of war? I didn't act hastily. As the head of Fleur Eternelle, I knew that impulsiveness could destroy an entire empire. I forwarded the email to Claire, my head of security, with a single command: check the source of these documents. I want to know everything. While waiting, I picked up the phone and called my assistant. Postpone all payments for the castle lease and the Dior wedding dress contract. Reason: needs to be reviewed. This was a defensive move, a way to regain control. If Elodie has a secret, I will bring it to light, I told myself, tightening my grip on the wineglass until my knuckles were white. The next morning, Adrien called, his voice trembling, but with a determination I rarely saw. Mom, I talked to Elodie. She's very upset that the news about the castle contract being postponed reached her. She doesn't understand why. He paused, taking a breath. I asked the de Valois family's lawyer. They confirmed there are no debts like you suspect. Is there a misunderstanding here? I heard the conflict in his voice, torn between his love for Elodie and the lifelong trust he had in me. Mom, I need to know the truth. I'm looking into it, Adrien, I replied curtly, my voice cold as ice. Be patient. I hung up before he could say another word. An hour later, my secretary informed me that Elodie had sent an email. It was short and condescending. I believe this is a misunderstanding. When you calm down, we can talk. Calm down? The girl dared to say I had lost my composure? I had never been more clear-headed and dangerous. The next morning, my phone exploded like a bomb. Messages, notifications, and humiliating headlines sent from everywhere. The engagement party of the century turns into a public embarrassment. The article in Le Figaro was the most cruel. The accompanying photo was taken from a perfect angle to tear me down. I was standing there, champagne glass in hand, while Elodie turned away, laughing with someone else. The angle had captured the moment my lips tightened for a second. The image of a dethroned queen. The press tore apart the perfect family I had built for many years, calling it an empty spectacle. All of Paris was laughing at me. I sat there, in my dining room, my coffee growing cold on the table. My whole life I had controlled my own narrative, and now it was being ripped to shreds before the eyes of millions. I felt as if the world was collapsing, and I was standing in the middle of its ashes. Then the doorbell rang, decisive and full of power, interrupting the chaos in my head. The door opened, and the past rushed in. Jean-Pierre, my ex-husband whom I hadn't seen in 15 years. He hadn't changed much, still in a well-tailored suit, salt and pepper hair, and eyes cold as ice. Those eyes, I remembered them very well. They were exactly the same as the day he stood in the dock, losing the lawsuit of the century to me. At that time, I had exposed him for secretly transferring Fleur Eternelle's money into his own secret investment funds. I had stripped him of everything, his reputation, his partners, and even Adrien. My son had chosen to stay with me. You took everything from me, he had once screamed in the courtroom. Now, standing in my living room, I saw in his eyes, not just old hatred, it was a craving for possession, wanting to pull Adrien to his side, and perhaps, wanting to regain some influence over Fleur Eternelle itself. He walked in without a word of greeting, holding a file. You should see this, he said, his voice deep and gravelly. He placed it on the coffee table, next to the newspapers that were exposing my humiliation. A deliberate arrangement. I knew these documents were fake, prepared through a discreet media company he often used. But I also knew Jean-Pierre. He was always too confident in his own intelligence, and in that confidence, he always left a loophole. I would find it. I sat down, leisurely flipping through the file, as if I were looking at a fashion catalog. Bank statements with Elodie's name, but the money came from strange men. Photos of her in the dim light of a bar, intimate with suspicious figures. Invoices for designer goods that I knew Adrian would never buy. A perfect indictment, professionally crafted to portray her as a gold digger. It was designed to add fuel to the fire burning inside me. I looked up, meeting his eyes directly. Why? He shrugged. A cold shrug that had once made me realize I had married the wrong man. I just want you to see your real enemy. He said enemy, but his eyes were fixed on me. In my mind, everything twisted together. The humiliation at the party, the headlines, and this forged file. My anger now had a face, a name, but I would not act on impulse. I was not the woman of 15 years ago. I pushed the file back towards him, a decisive gesture. Thank you for bringing this, but I don't need these things. My voice became sharp, cold as ice. If you've set up the chessboard, Jean-Pierre, remember, I'm the one who decides who gets checkmated. Adrian rushed into my office like a storm, his face pale, his eyes full of conflict. He slammed the door shut, an action he had never dared to do, then pulled a white envelope from his jacket and placed it forcefully on my desk. Mom, I checked with the de Valois family's lawyer. His voice trembled, not just with anger but because he was caught between the two women he loved. They confirmed there are no debts like in this letter. What do you know about it? He looked at me, his eyes pleading for a denial, a reason to continue trusting me. I talked to Elodie. She thinks someone is trying to drive us apart, to ruin everything. Mom, I need the truth. I looked at him, the son I had sheltered all his life, now standing before me to question me. My heart ached, but my voice remained firm. I didn't send that letter, Adrian, but I swear to you, I will find out who is behind it. He stopped, looked at me for a long time, his eyes still full of suspicion. Then he turned and left, leaving the door ajar like an unhealed wound. I waited for his footsteps to fade before picking up the envelope. A blank sheet of paper, no logo, no traces, just the cold, typewritten words. The de Valois family owes millions of euros. Back off, or all of Paris will know. Jean-Pierre. Only he would be so cruel and cunning. He sent an anonymous letter with no sign of me, so that Adrian, with his artistic nature and belief in the truth, would go and check for himself, and then come back to question his own mother. He was turning my son into a weapon against me. 3 days later, the second attack hit. Le Monde published a 2-page article, The de Valois Family, Glamour or Illusion. The article dragged Elodie's entire family into a media storm. The debt figures were cleverly fabricated. The abandoned real estate project in Provence. Rumors about selling many antiques to pay off bank interest. And most cruelly, a photo of Elodie with a married entrepreneur from an event years ago was placed right in the middle of the page. The information was too detailed for an ordinary person to dismiss as rumor, and I knew that most of it was a lie. Adrian called me right after the news spread online. This time, his voice was no longer choked, but had a cold determination. Mom, I met with Elodie. She's devastated, but she says someone is deliberately slandering her family with forged documents. He paused, as if to gather courage. I contacted a friend in journalism, they said. The documents used in the newspaper have clear signs of forgery. Do you know who is behind this? I was silent for a second. I realized Adrian was no longer just questioning me. He was looking for an ally. He was trying to reconcile me and Elodie, even though his heart was breaking. I didn't do this, Adrian, I said, my voice more certain than ever. But I promise you, I will find the truth, and that person will pay. Elodie disappeared from social media. The proud girl of yesterday had retreated into the shadows. One last post appeared on her locked account. The truth will be revealed. No parties, no fake smiles. She withdrew into silence, like a dethroned queen preparing for a silent battle to reclaim her kingdom. I called Claire, the person I trusted more than anyone. Dig up the entire financial history of the de Valois family. I want the originals, untouched by anyone, without any filters. I want the naked truth. After 5 sleepless days of work, Claire placed a file in front of me. There was nothing inside. No debts, no shady transactions. Their financial history was as clean as a blank page. What Le Monde published was based on forged bank statements, madam, Claire said, her voice firm. That photo was also a composite, cut and pasted from an advertising photo shoot for a jewelry brand 3 years ago. The truth was clear. Jean-Pierre had orchestrated everything. I worked with the best team of lawyers in Paris for a week. Our goal: Vanderlyn Capital, Jean, Pierre's financial empire. Every door was shut tight. His partners, the ones who had once dined at my home, now refused to cooperate, fearing his power. Finally, a former employee, a man whose career Jean-Pierre had ruined, agreed to meet me after being given a guarantee of absolute safety. He gave me what I needed: a copy of the contract for a strategic media company, signed by Jean-Pierre himself. But Le Figaro demanded more. They needed undeniable proof. I contacted an old friend in finance in Geneva, a man who owed me a favor. After 10 stressful days, he sent me the decisive evidence: bank transactions and internal emails, exposing how Jean-Pierre had used shell companies to funnel money for this smear campaign. When everything was certain, I sent the entire file to the editor-in-chief of Le Figaro. This is the final move, I thought, feeling a coldness run down my spine. The article in Le Figaro the next day shook all of Paris. Vanderlyn Capital, a network of financial manipulation and forged documents. The article was accompanied by bank statements, shady contracts, and a list of Jean-Pierre's shell companies, all thoroughly verified. A few hours later, the economic police raided Vanderlyn Capital's office. Jean-Pierre's assets were frozen. Although a good lawyer helped him temporarily escape prison, his reputation had turned to dust. There was no longer a place for a man like him in Paris. Adrien became more silent than ever. On the rare occasions we met, his eyes held a painful conflict between his love for Elodie and his loyalty to me. He avoided direct questions, but I knew he was struggling with the truth that his father was a monster, and his mother was the one who had defeated that monster. Elodie, though her name was cleared, only sent a short message. "Thank you, but I'm not ready to meet yet." I read the message and nodded to myself. I understood. This victory had left unhealable cracks in my family. I called Adrien. "I'm not asking for your forgiveness. I just want you to know the truth. Read tomorrow's newspaper. After that, the choice is yours." I hung up, not waiting for him to reply. In my head, I imagined Jean-Pierre's face when he read Le Figaro. This time, he had no gray area left to hide in. 15 years ago, I left Jean-Pierre because I couldn't stand his true nature: cold, calculating, and willing to lie to gain power. I had tried to hold on, believing there was still some affection inside him. But after discovering his lies and his sneaky schemes, I knew I had to leave. Not because I was weak, but because I didn't want to be a pawn in his game. Now, this family was like a calm lake, but underneath were fierce whirlpools, pushing each of us onto unavoidable paths. Paris was still whispering about the Vanderlyn Capital scandal, but I no longer cared about those whispers. Sitting in my office, the dim light shining on the sparkling Fleur Eternelle perfume bottles, I felt a chilling emptiness. The victory over Jean-Pierre didn't bring the joy I had expected. Adrien was still distant, and Elodie was still keeping her distance. I knew that to mend these fragments, I had to step over my own pride. I arranged to meet Adrien at a small café in Montmartre, where we used to sit for hours when he was a dreamy boy. Adrien arrived, his eyes still holding that conflict, but he agreed to sit down. "I read the article," he said, his voice low. "I know you weren't behind the letter, and I know what my father did. But Mom, why didn't you tell me from the beginning? Why did you let me doubt you?" I looked into his eyes and saw again the image of the boy who used to draw colorful pictures at the dining table. "Because I was wrong, Adrien," I admitted, and for the first time in many years, I felt my voice tremble. "I wanted to protect you, but I let my own doubt and pride obscure everything. I'm sorry." Adrien was silent, swirling his coffee cup. "Elodie wants to meet you," he said after a long while. "She's not angry, but she needs you to understand that she loves me, not because of Fleur Eternelle or your reputation." I nodded, feeling an invisible burden lifted. "I will meet her," I replied, my voice gentle. The meeting took place on a rainy afternoon at Elodie's apartment. She stood there, still elegant, but no longer with the distant pride of before. You saved my family, Elodie said, her eyes sincere. But at the engagement party, I was wrong. I let the pressure from my family and that letter make me act coldly. I just wanted to prove that I was strong enough to be worthy of Adrian. I looked at her, and for the first time, I didn't see a rival, but a young girl trying to find her place in my calculating world. We all make mistakes, Elodie, I said. What's important is how we choose to fix them. And perhaps we can start over.